You know, when Anna Kepner tragically died aboard the Carnival Horizon while it was making its way through international waters toward Miami, her death didn't just spark an ordinary Florida murder case. Actually, it became this incredibly complex federal prosecution right there in the Southern District of Florida. And that immediately raises some massive questions for us, right? Like, why in the world does the United States get to claim criminal jurisdiction over something that allegedly happened out at sea? Why is the trial taking place in Miami, of all places? And honestly, most importantly, what do prosecutors actually have to prove before a jury can convict anyone? Well, before we dive in and break all of these answers down, do me a quick favor and take a second to follow Cassian Creed Daily Update on Spotify. By following right now, you're going to get the next court record update the very second the federal judge rules on major evidence issues or when the trial kicks off. Just a quick note before we start. This explainer is going to strictly separate what the public record absolutely establishes from what prosecutors are simply alleging and, of course, what remains highly disputed.
Okay, let's get right into it by establishing our absolute objective baseline. Right now, federal prosecutors have charged a defendant we only know as TH, who was just 16 years old at the time of the alleged conduct. It is absolutely critical to understand that TH has pleaded not guilty. The indictment we're looking at contains strictly allegations. These are not findings of fact, as the U.S. Department of Justice makes crystal clear. He remains presumed innocent unless the government can prove every single element beyond a reasonable doubt.
So, to unpack this whole thing, here is how we're going to break it down. Number 1, remembering Anna Kepner. Number 2, jurisdiction and venue explained. Number 3, the adult transfer proceeding. Number 4, the federal charges explained. Number 5, mapping the untested evidence. And finally, number 6, what the jury decides.
All right, Section 1, remembering Anna Kepner.
Before we get bogged down in all the dense legal frameworks and the procedural hurdles of this case, we really need to shift our focus to the human being at the center of it all. Let's start with the verified facts about who Anna actually was. She was an 18-year-old girl from Titusville, Florida. According to some really solid reporting from the Associated Press, Anna was a high school cheerleader over at Temple Christian School. In November of 2025, she was traveling aboard the Carnival Horizon, taking a trip with members of her blended family. At her memorial service, her relatives actually asked mourners to wear bright colors. They did this to honor what her friends and family beautifully described as her incredibly bright personality and her deep, deep love for spending time on the water.
Moving on to Section 2, jurisdiction and venue explained. Having grounded ourselves in who Anna was, let's pivot and look at the first major legal hurdle in this whole situation. Look, there is a very crucial legal difference between jurisdiction and venue. Jurisdiction basically asks, does the United States even have the authority to prosecute this? People always seem to think international waters are completely lawless, like the Wild West, right? But federal prosecutors allege this specific case falls under the special maritime and territorial jurisdiction of the United States. That's governed by 18 U.S.C. Section 7, which basically allows federal criminal law to apply to covered conduct out on the high seas. And then we have venue. Venue is simply the physical location where the trial happens. Because the alleged offense was committed outside any ordinary federal district, 18 U.S.C. Section 3238 steps in. It dictates that the trial has to take place where the accused is arrested or first brought. So, because the ship returned to Miami, the trial is legally seated in the Southern District of Florida. The crime itself didn't happen in Miami, but the law strictly dictates that the legal proceedings have to take place there.
Which brings us to Section 3, the adult transfer proceeding. So, with the where and the why answered, you're probably wondering, how does a 16-year-old end up facing an adult federal trial? Let's walk through this procedural timeline to really contextualize how this case has progressed. It started in November 2025 when the incident occurred on the Carnival Horizon. By February 2026, TH was initially charged. Now, because he was 16, this was done through a sealed federal juvenile information under the Federal Juvenile Delinquency Act. Federal juvenile proceedings are highly unusual, and they're typically strictly confidential. But then, in April 2026, U.S. District Judge Beth Bloom stepped in and actually ordered the matter transferred for adult prosecution. Following that ruling, TH pleaded not guilty. Right now, the trial is scheduled for September 8, 2026, though honestly, federal trial dates change all the time. But it is vital to note right here that an adult transfer is strictly a procedural ruling. It's based on statutory considerations. It absolutely, 100%, does not establish that the accused committed the charged acts.
Let's get into Section 4, the federal charges explained.
Now that we know TH is facing an adult trial, we need to detail the exact allegations brought forward by the federal grand jury indictment. And again, the crucial word to remember here is allegations. Count 1 is first-degree murder under federal law. That means prosecutors are on the hook to prove the unlawful killing of a human being with malice aforethought, deliberation, or through specific felony murder circumstances. Then we have count 2, which is aggravated sexual abuse under Section 2241. That covers sexual acts accomplished through force or threats. If there is a conviction, the Department of Justice states the maximum announced penalty is life imprisonment. It's deeply important to remember that because TH was under 18 at the time of all this alleged conduct, the death penalty is constitutionally unavailable.
Next up is Section 5, mapping the untested evidence. To prove these incredibly heavy charges, prosecutors are going to rely on evidence. But court evidence isn't like what you see on TV. We need a really strict framework to separate what evidence may actually establish from what it simply cannot prove. Starting with the medical evidence, the Miami-Dade Medical Examiner's Office determined the cause of death was mechanical asphyxiation. Basically, that means breathing was prevented by physical force or obstruction. Now, this medical evidence absolutely establishes a cause of death, and it establishes the presence of injuries. However, by itself, this medical finding does not prove identity. It doesn't prove intent, it doesn't prove premeditation, and it certainly does not prove the separate charge of sexual abuse.
Okay, what about the biological and digital stuff? Well, biological and digital evidence may establish the presence of DNA, specific device account activity, and Wi-Fi timestamps. But, as the defense is going to actively contest, there are very strict limitations here. A DNA sample does not inherently prove when it was deposited or if any force was used. And a Wi-Fi timestamp on a phone, that does not definitively prove who had actual physical possession of that device at that exact moment.
And the exact same limitations apply to the surveillance evidence. We all know cruise ships are completely covered in cameras. Those cameras can definitely establish proximity and provide some great investigation context within their strict field of view. But the limitation is glaringly obvious. Cameras cannot prove what occurred inside a closed cabin or what happened even just an inch outside of their specific frame. Furthermore, evidence that gets described in pretrial motions or detention hearings isn't automatically admitted for the jury to see. The judge still has to rule on its legal admissibility first.
Finally, Section 6, what the jury decides.
So we've mapped out the jurisdiction, the transfer to adult court, the charges, and the fiercely contested evidence. Now we have to focus on the ultimate burden of proof that's waiting at trial. An indictment only starts a prosecution. It absolutely does not decide it. Hey, if this explainer helped you grasp the structured reality of this case, please share it. And don't forget to follow Cassian Creed Daily Update on Spotify for those real-time court rulings. Ultimately, the massive overarching question the federal jury is going to face is this. Has every single element been proven beyond a reasonable doubt? Did the government absolutely prove who caused Anna's death? Did they prove the specific mental state required for first-degree murder? Or do reasonable alternative explanations still remain?